hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to this incredible documentary. What can people expect if they watch it?
So I'm Victoria Fiore. I'm the director of Nascondino, which is 4 years in the life of a young street poet called Entoni, and sort of his adventures as the law changes in Italy when a decree comes in that is to take kids away from families potentially related to organized crime in order to stop them from entering it as well. And we see Entoni basically face this. It's a film that we decided to tell together with the characters, so they choose a lot of the way that they get to tell their story, reclaiming a lot of the narrative that has been lost in, say, series and books about Naples, where crime is at the front, right and centre, which we choose not to do in our film. So, yeah, I think that's a little bit of that.
And can you tell us a bit about, your own personal connection, I guess, to this place, to this community, and the fact that you had kind of the knowledge and the ability to be able to kind of really gain the trust of the people in order to be able to tell the story from their perspective. As you say, normally when we see shows about these kind of places that it's very glamorized, or it's not from the point of view of the people who are actually living this experience. So how does your own background kind of feed into this?
So my background helps because I'm actually from Naples. My whole family is from there. A large part of my family is still living there now. Neapolitan is one of my first languages, so that first and foremost helps when you're speaking to them, that they have a common tongue. My family is from an area that's quite similar to what they're going through, so I recognized a lot of the ways of speaking, and there's a lot of things that you must, in order to refer to it, you must avoid it. And we have that kind of grammar, let's say, that meant that they could trust myself and the DP. But it's not just that. We had to go through a long process. One of my very good friends, social worker in the area, she introduced us to the kids. We went straight in with a workshop, telling a story that they wanted to tell. We gained the trust of the kids, but that wasn't enough. To do a film, we needed to gain the trust of the elders as well, so that the kids could know that we were also to respect. So before even commencing the film, there was a lot of trust work. I think you can see within the film, it's quite intimately shot. And that's only been through years and years of getting to know the whole community and making sure that we're on a level with them all. So it's a lot of dinners and a lot of watching Celebrity Big Brother behind the scenes, a lot of getting my nails done by the characters themselves in order to gain that trust with all of them. Yeah.
And how did you kind of settle upon the subjects that we see in the film? Because I guess it's not casting in the same way you do for kind of a fictional film, but there is that process, of course, of having to meet a lot of people and decide who you're going to focus on and who you're going to follow, especially when there's 4 years of work that's going to go into this.
I mean, when I saw Entoni for the first time, I knew his older brother, a lot better, and the older kids that were around him. But when I saw him, he was 9 years old, and he seemed to be one of the most mischievous, but also sweetest of the crew, of the group that he was hanging around in. And he was really drawn to the camera. So we fell in love with him. He fell in love with the camera. We started to teach him how it works, and we'd go around and try it out, and then sort of knew that it would be him. We had no idea what would happen, that there was even this idea from judges about taking children away. We had no idea. We just knew that he was a very beautiful character to watch, and it's been entertaining. So, yeah, that's how we chose him. And then the grandmother sort of saw us while we were shooting with him and invited us up for a coffee and asked me if I knew who she was, and I said no, but obviously I did. And as soon as she kind of showed a little bit of involvement, it sort of made sense because she gives a lot of context to the film that we lose. So it's not just with Entoni. But yeah, that was years and years of work to get her to show the nail. So, so yeah, we did.
Going on that journey, I guess you know, with like any documentary, at the beginning, you might have an idea of the story you want to tell, or, you know, the context that you want to try and capture, but you don't really know because, of course, you know, it's the lives of real people. So you couldn't have really predicted the journey that you would go on. So what was that experience like, and what would have been some of, you know, the highlights, but also some of the challenging moments of going through all that?
Yeah, so the script had to be completely updated every time. First times we went out to shoot with Entoni, I thought that the story would be completely different. I thought it would be a choral story about lots of different kids and how they saw the neighborhood. Obviously, that changed when things started to happen, when situations started to shift. And I thought the film was over when he was put in the first community home. Because we wouldn't have access to film him, we'd lose him, he'd stay there, he'd you know, he'd stay there, and then he'd probably live a good life and, you know, develop wherever he was. So we thought that that was pretty much the end, but it wasn't. So that was a pretty low point. A pretty low point was also just really witnessing him going through this on a personal level. And it took a lot of love and support from the family, from the social workers, and realizing that we're just filmmakers telling a story. We're not like trained psychologists to be accompanying a child going through what he does. So yeah, that was a really, really difficult point. But the beautiful point was when you do come together and you do watch it in the end, the family watched it, and say the mother said to me, I've never felt so seen. Like this really feels real, like us, and just all in tears and hugging, and then you know that you did something that was, yeah, that meant something to them. That's really good.
And something that I think is really striking about the film is kind of the form of it. I mean, it feels, like you said, very intimate. We're very kind of up close to the subjects, but it's also quite fluid. You know, sort of, you know, really just trying to be kind of, you know, a fly on the wall, you know, as these young kids kind of like having that experience of what feels like freedom, but then of course knowing what might be coming to them in future. And you know, these really sort of candid conversations you had with the grandmother as well. What was your approach, I guess, as a kind of a filmmaker, and how you wanted to capture kind of the spirit of the community, and you know, how you wanted that to come together and look on screen?
So just speaking about the form, I'm sure you'll realize from watching the film that there's a lot that we cannot say or that we cannot show. There's a lot of it. So we had to think of an intelligent way to go about not showing the streets where this is taking place, to go about not really giving too many details, but telling everything about it. My initial thought was that I wanted to know what was going on inside the minds of people living these kinds of stories, because we've seen so much about guns and violence. I wanted to avoid that. So there's that, and there's avoiding lots of things in order to respect our characters. And then the fact that Entoni also wanted to become an actor, so he wanted to direct these scenes, and then that became part of how we wanted to tell it as well. And he'd have these ideas of, maybe I want people to see me in this way, and maybe I'll escape in this way, and could you do it that way? And then coming up with that, I thought was just even better than maybe filming his real escape, like while he was doing it, because this way we get to see how he wants to see himself and get that feeling of freedom that he imagines for himself, right? And then as for intimacy, as I said, we spent a lot of years gaining trust for Alfredo, our DP, in order to be able to get up that close in these moments where, yeah, it would be really difficult to get there otherwise. So there's huge trust work behind there to tell that. Yeah.
And you know, I was reading about how, you know, like we were saying there at the beginning, like the impact of, you know, these stories being told in kind of sensationalized ways, that people are then actually kind of like acting out almost these scenes that they watch on the telly, and it's kind of this self, you know, fulfilling process. It's actually kind of feeding back into the way people behave, and especially young people. So, what might have been some examples of that? And I think there seems to be an endless appetite for these kind of like crime shows. So, maybe there's a bit of, culpability there on viewers as well to think about what the impact would be, not just filmmakers, but also the people watching it. The impact socially, on some of these communities of having that on screen.
I mean, the impact socially has been a very physical example was a couple of kids in the Spanish quarters have carried out crimes in the style of scenes that they've seen in films, like say with like a gun like this big and then running in a certain way, like recreating scenes. There were mothers during the shooting process that would come to us and tell me, why don't you use our kid who knows how to shoot a gun? He's like 9. like, I don't really care to show that, sorry. And also assuming an identity, once the identity of a city is so strong and based around that, and it's not just Naples, there's so many identities, like it's just, if it's very much fixed as this box and nothing else has really come out that identifies them, they're going to take it as a badge of honor, and go around and speaking like people do in films and making jokes like they do in films, because that's what we identify as. I think that's really dangerous because you sort of close yourself in a box, and sometimes kids don't really have the opportunity to see themselves as something else. So yeah, that's why the work that social workers do and doing all these workshops is so important to see beyond that. Yeah.
And I guess it's about kind of, breaking down those stereotypes, those cliches, that we have gotten maybe too used to seeing, because otherwise people can't envision their own selves and their own futures in a different way if they kind of associate with how they're depicted, on screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what do you hope the impact or, the takeaways from the film to be? And, when people walk out the cinema, what do you hope people to feel, and maybe, discussions that maybe can be started off the back of a film like this?
Well, I just really hope that the audience is able to connect with the family, with Entoni's story, and then whatever comes out of that would be great. I don't have any particular dreams of changing the way people think and changing the way this is, because unfortunately this is very real, and there are so many things that need to compute together in order to resolve the issue which is at stake, whether it's societal, governmental, it's familial, it's societal. There's so much. Just creating awareness around how much it takes to create this kind of change, I think, is enough for me. And then if one day this could lead to bigger discussions about policy in Italy and the impact, that would be incredible. And not just in Italy, but beyond, because this is not something that happens just in Italy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess you can see in one way that, of course, some kind of policy needs to be implemented to try and stop sort of cycles of violence and things being passed down from generation to generation. But seeing how this particular policy of intervention is being carried out, it just seems like surely that can't be the best thing for these young people. Did you have a strong feeling about that, watching kind of the impact on individuals up close in that way?
I don't want to give away too much of the film, but once a certain pattern reveals itself and it just happens again and again and again, surely I don't really understand why that pattern just keeps on happening and something else isn't given as an option. It's just lack of interest in resolving that issue. But also I see the younger brother or younger friends who weren't having these kinds of issues questioning authorities. That's problematic to me, because once that's lost, then it's just a battle between the authorities and the people, and then we're not going to really move forward if policy doesn't help young people and make them feel that they're on they're on a level, disrespect them a bit, make the situation worse and aggravate it, I believe.
Mm. And I guess it also raises kind of a broader question, which again, so the very specific scenario that they're in this particular place, but you could apply it to places in the UK, that how much of these things are about individual choice, and how much is it about the circumstances that you're born into and that you're brought up in, and that it feels like there's no other way out, or no other way to kind of like forge a life. So I think that's another kind of key question that comes up and looking in this particular issue.
I'm sorry, I throw a lot more questions than answers, but then in the filmmaking process, they do come up. There is no answer. At least I don't have one anyway. Mm-hmm. These are exactly the kinds of questions that you'll come out asking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Maybe you can also quickly tell us what you're working on next. I believe you're on a fiction film for your next one, is that right?
I'm in development with a fiction film as well as a longer series. And right now I'm also shooting short work. So I'm currently on a short documentary out here. But there's a lot going on.
Yeah, exciting stuff. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Congratulations on the film. I can't wait for everyone else to have the opportunity to see it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.